Hello and welcome back to doing some unit tests with T-SQL-T and SQL Server in the projects. Hopefully you watched the last video and had some time to absorb the information that was in there. Today we're going to get back with the AdventureWorks sample and take a little bit deeper look into testing that some objects exist. So it's important to know that your objects exist inside of a deployed database, right? To ensure that your project is deploying properly and that there isn't anything in there that you don't want, and there is stuff in there, is everything in there that you do want. So let's take a quick look at going into the human resources schema here in the AdventureWorks and looking at the department table. So this just is a normal old table, right? There's nothing, I don't see any foreign keys that it references. There's some extended properties, and it looks like Microsoft likes to use these extended properties in their demo databases. I don't know how much you're going to find those in actual databases where you walk into a new position and it's cold. More likely what you're going to find is just the database itself, not anything that has all the extended properties that are telling you what it is that's going on, right? So let's not depend on finding that stuff. So down here, I've written one more basic assertion test to say my object exists, which is human resources dot department. Okay. If you recall from the last video, we created these published profiles. So there's a published profile here for AdventureWorks, and there's a published profile here for the unit tests. So taking a look again, I just double clicked on that to open it up. And taking a look here, we're saying deploy database properties. We're not blocking incremental, but our drop says drop objects in target but not in source. So anything that got deployed out of AW tests last time we deployed to local is going to get wiped out because it doesn't exist inside of this regular AdventureWorks database. And you want that because it clears out the trash. And it's important to make sure that people aren't adding things randomly that don't exist inside of the project into your deployed databases. So we're going to publish this real quick. And it published successfully locally. And now we have our new test here. Here's our new test. And we're going to publish our this is the same thing that we did last time, except this configuration is different. Right now we're not dropping anything. The one thing that I did want to change inside of all of these projects, and I want to make sure that we're excluding both users and logins. So that's actually important. So we're going to resave that, and then we're going to publish it. Because it's redeploying everything, right? Everything that happens is new. And so let's click on view results, because viewing results, right, we're looking at the results of that script, all the things that it creates, but we're also looking at the results of the unit test. So here's the results of the unit test, right? And that's part of this post-deployment script where we're saying tsqlt.runAll. That's this. There's our two tests, there's our success, and everything is great, right? So what did we do here? We looked at making sure that something exists inside of the human resources schema. That is the department table, okay? And that's a basic assertion that we're saying this should exist. So let's do one thing here. Let's go into DBO, and we're going to add a table, just to say add a table, and we're going to call this should not exist. It helps if I can spell correctly. Should not exist. And we're going to give should not exist a basic ID here, and we're going to say that that's a bit value and it's not null. And again, I can't type. So there's our basic table, right? Should not exist. And let's assume that this is this is a project that you've been working on for a while, and you have a test already down here, and we're going to add that test real quick, right? AW tests dot test, right? Should not exist does in fact exist, right? So that's the basic premise behind this particular type of unit tests. And this is, some people would call this test-driven development, but it really isn't. Well, to some extent it is, but test-driven development means that you're writing the unit test first, letting it fail, and then going back and creating the code so that it doesn't fail. So in this case, we would have written the test to say, you know, we would have written the test to say assert object exists, and we would say, why can't I type today? We would say dbo dot should not exist right? We would say something like this. We would say assert object exists should not exist. So should not exist will exist when we deploy again. So we're going to save all of this, and because we saved it all, there's our should not exist table. We're going to deploy that, and remember, through this particular deployment, we're saying drop anything that does not exist in the source. And I want to change this to say, make sure that we exclude logins, because we don't want any of that. We're going to resave that profile, and then I'm going to publish it. So again, we're publishing to local. And it's in the process of getting rid of everything that that shouldn't exist in there, right? So there we go, that's done. So then let's take a look down here and publish our unit tests. And again, I'm just double clicking on those publish profiles to get them to run. Okay, so let's look at the results of that and scroll all the way down to the bottom where we see our post-deployment script. And sure enough, this says, right, test should not exist, which is our table, does in fact exist. That's there. We're all good. Okay, now what? Now what do we do? So let's say that somebody comes through and says, oh, you know what? This should not exist. We're going to delete that. And we delete it. We right click on it, choose delete, and we deleted it out of the project. Now, of course, it's still going to exist over here, right? So there it is, should not exist. And we want to make sure that that gets gone. So again, we're going to depend on our publish profile, and we're going to publish that, and it will go through and drop the should not exist table. So what's that going to do to unit test, right? Now that the table doesn't exist, refresh that. And again, you see here it does not exist anymore because it should not exist. So let's publish our unit tests. And this will be the first time that you get to watch the unit tests fail, which is good. So really, what is this all about? This is about creating a scenario where, and again, so did you see the failure? Right, so here's our failure. Failure, DBO should not exist, does not exist. Isn't that great? And there's our failure. So we want to make sure that our unit tests stay up to date. I'm just going to close that. Stay up to date with our project, and everything else stays up to date. So we're going to say assert object does not exist. Now, when our unit tests run, it helps if that's named properly. There we go. Assert object does not exist. So we're saying this object should in fact now not exist. It's been removed from our project, so it shouldn't be in the deployment. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, this is all about keeping the dead wood out of your solution, right? Keeping the dead wood out of everything. So you can also change the name does in fact not exist. We're going to change that name. We're also going to have to change the name here, right? Should not exist, does in fact not exist. So that's pretty important stuff so that things stay clean. Everything should stay as clean as possible. So we're going to publish this. Just double click on it and choose publish. But we wanted that failure. We expected that failure, and that's not a bad thing. So don't freak out when we publish the unit test. It failed. That's what we wanted it to do because we removed the table that it expected. You also see here that this, when I renamed everything, this changed and added what's called a refactor log, and we can look at that and you'll see what's actually in the refactor log. It's a pretty common thing. So now we have a success, right? Because we're saying that we asserted that our table should not exist, and it in fact did not exist. So here's the result of renaming our does in fact exist to does in fact not exist, right? This is the part of the refactor log. And you can see here where it says it's been skipped, right? And it gives, in the refactor log, it gives this unique key, unique identifier, which is a GUID, right? It's been skipped because it doesn't need to be done. Again, that stored procedure doesn't exist. We wiped it out in the first deployment where we got rid of all the dead wood that was in the database. So now that we're saying test, should not exist, does in fact not exist, we get a success out of that, right? Because it doesn't exist. So that's part of keeping your project clean. As we work through future examples and maybe start looking at some actual test-driven development, then we'll be looking at making sure that our project stays in sync with our actual deployed database so that and such that we can successfully test it all the time. That drift between the project as it exists and is part of your source control, and again, we'll still continue to add things to source control, and your deployed database is where things and problems happen. Hopefully that makes sense. where bad things happen, I should say. Anyhow, so that's it for today. Just a quick demo of using the test project to ensure that your real project stays in sync and nice and clean. So thanks for following along. I hope to see you on the next one, and we'll talk to you soon.